So good evening, everybody. I, on behalf of Ahmedabad Physician Association and Noble Gastro Hospital, welcome you all to 22nd Clinical Summit of Advanced Gastro Summit, which is by a very renowned speaker, Dr. Rakesh Kalpala, on metabolic endoscopy. And before that, I would like to mention that this is our last session today. I thank all the organizing committee members and all the societies, especially Physician Association of Ahmedabad and Gujarat and Surgical Association of Ahmedabad and Gujarat and Family Physician Association. So today we have Dr. Rakesh Kalpala with us. I would like to also thank Dr. Ashwin Gadvi, who was a president of Ahmedabad Physician Association recently. His term has finished. He is also with us. Thank you, sir, for your cooperation. I would like to request my mentor, teacher, Dr. Mahesh Goenka is here. I would like to request you on behalf of the organizing committee, please thank him that he supported us to be, he accepted our invitation as a course director and he has guided us from time to time. Please, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Yogesh, for those kind words. Yogesh has worked with us as a colleague for some time in the previous years, and I have seen his work not only when he was with us in Calcutta, but also had the opportunity to visit his center and see his work in Noble Hospital in Ahmedabad. I'm really impressed by a couple of things in him. One is that he keeps himself updated, both from knowledge-wise as well as the clinical service which he's giving to the society in Ahmedabad. And more than that, he's a great human being and a very modest human being. That's a wonderful part of his personality. So I must congratulate him for carrying on with this activity, carrying on with 12 to 22 webinars. One after another is not an easy job. We know that to organize this, to get the right faculty is sometimes very tough, particularly in this webinar era which is going on. So I must congratulate him. And we were just discussing before we went on air that he would possibly have a second innings, which may start after a lunch break sort of thing for some time. So with that, best wishes for whatever you do in the future, and look forward to listening to part of Rakesh's talk. Unfortunately, I have to go back again because of the webinar over doings. Now, what is happening is that there's another webinar which is going on from Coimbatore, and I'm a part of that also. So Rakesh, I would possibly update with your slides later on once again.
Sir, there is a small request. You can announce the winner of.
Thank you, Yogesh.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, I've been given a name by Yogesh, and I'm very happy to note there's somebody who has attended all 22 lectures in the previous, all the webinars which Ahmedabad Physician Association has been doing with Yogesh being the leader. It is Dr. Smith Kumar Bagashia, who is he from Delhi? From Delhi?
Yes.
He's from New Delhi, Yogesh?
Yes.
Yeah, he has attended all the 22 lectures, and he is being given the subscription for up to date for 1 year. So congratulations to Dr. Smith Kumar. Let's see, you have second prizes and third prize also?
We have those who have attended all, those who have attended more than 10. So that will announce it at the end, sir.
Good, great. So look forward to further academic association with you, Yogesh. And thank you for asking me to be here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So I would like to introduce today's moderator, Dr. Anand Patel. He is a very enthusiastic GI and bariatric surgeon from Ahmedabad. Dr. Anand, please introduce our chairperson, and Dr. Reddy, you can then introduce Dr. Rakesh, and please, sir, then you can start your talk.
Good evening, everyone. And first of all, I am very thankful for this organizing team to provide me an opportunity to moderate this session. And today's session is on the metabolic endoscopy. And well, today we have two well-known faculties to chair this session. I would like to invite Dr. Vishwanath Reddy. He is one of the senior consultant gastroenterologists from Hyderabad, and Dr. Kapil Jambal, who is a gastroenterologist for Gurgaon. I welcome you all, and I would request them to introduce our today's speaker.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this meeting. I thank Yogesh, and we'll go ahead now. I think Dr. Rakesh, we all know him. He's a very popular senior gastroenterologist working with the Asian Institute of Gastroenterology. He is the director of the metabolic and the bariatric endoscopy, and he has very good number of international and national publications, and he is faculty for many of the international and national meetings. He has membership of most of the prestigious endoscopy and gastro or motility related societies, and he has also won a lot of accolades, awards, and I think he's very popular in our part of the country. And I think we'll go ahead with the meeting. Over to Dr. Rakesh.
Thanks, Vishwanath, for the kind words. So I'll share my screen. One second, I'll just. Yeah, I'm audible and visible. Yogesh?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, my slides are visible?
Yes, sir, they are visible.
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, thanks, Yogesh, for this opportunity. And I know it's a last lecture, but I promise that I'll make it very entertainment and enthusiastic. So endoscopic management of obesity, again, bariatric endoscopy is a new field, upcoming field in the past 5 to 7 years. It has evolved and taken a big leap. And I believe strongly that this is going to be the field which people have to watch upon in the next 1 to 2 decades. So if you see the obesity, as we all know, it is as pandemic as COVID across the world. And now obesity is unfortunately more prevalent than hunger, which is a good sign as well as a bad sign. And the current surgical strategy probably will not meet the demands what we really want to look upon. And I know the bariatric surgeon on the panel will agree with me. So what to do with this? If you see the census, if not in anything, India is definitely competing with the United States of America in terms of prevalence of obesity, both in male and female. So that is one thing which undoubtedly we can say we are at par with USA. This is one interesting slide which I often put it in all my talks. So it's not you see the inner circle and outer circle. So it's not only the health conditions which lead to obesity, but you also have to stress upon the other outer layer conditions like education system, parenting, workplace. As you all know, we are all working from home. Not we, I mean the IT folks. And you see phenomenal increase in their weight and everything in the recent past 9 to 10 months. So these individual and environmental factors should be addressed upon and stressed upon when you really want to take care of obesity. It's very frequent behavior of all. Probably many of us also do the same. If we follow some diet restrictions, then try to lose weight. And because you're not able to lose weight, then most of them refuse surgery if they go to bariatric surgeon. Then they look for magic solutions like keto diet and Herbalife and all those stuff. Then you don't lose weight, you lose confidence on yourself because of the failure. And if you lose weight also, again, you regain weight because diet is not one thing which you really can do it forever and ever. And medical complications of obesity, we all know, I don't want to stress upon that in depth, but there are multiple from head to toe, every organ will get involved in obesity. It can be a truncal obesity or even the visceral, even a lean person can have visceral fat, which is again a different topic, which I don't want to get onto this. So you have medical therapy, that is diet, exercise, and pharmacotherapy, as we all know. Then you have the surgical therapy on the other hand, that is laparoscopic or open, RYGB or sleeve gastrectomy. So the endoscopy is kind of a bridge between the medical and surgical therapy. And as the time is evolving and new gadgets and devices are coming, endoscopy itself has got its own role in the field of bariatrics. This is a very interesting paper from NEJM in 2017. And mind you, this is a Western population and a Western data, which obviously will have a better, I don't say willpower, but better control on their own because they can dictate the time. And also the food is better off than our Indianized food. But as you see here, very interestingly, only 10% of the population have achieved the lifestyle, achieved the weight loss with lifestyle and pharmacological interventions. So you can understand only with diet and exercise how far a obese person can get on to normal BMI category. So of course, with due respect to surgeons, metabolic surgery is beyond doubt is really effective, and the results have proven beyond in literature widely published that 37% of sleeve gastrectomies and 42% of RYGB, they have fantastic results. And if you see the field of endoscopy in the logical progression, how it's happening, you see the field of orthopedics where they used to have the physiotherapy, then the joint replacement, the mid-level is arthroscopy. Same vis-a-vis in cardiology where you have the diet and lifestyle modifications, then you have the bypass grafting, and in between angioplasty. So I personally feel that in between the exercise and diet modifications and surgery, bariatric endoscopy is going to take a definite role in the future. If you come to bariatric endoscopy in 2020, so you have the gastric space occupying devices that are the balloons, which I'll touch upon. Then you have endoscopic sutured gastroplasties, that is remodeling of the stomach. Then you have the endoscopic bypass, that is duodenojejunal bypass liners. And also bariatric endoscopy is one where you kind of deal with the surgical or post-op complications, which is again another subject which I won't want to stress upon this, but just wanted to mention this, that this is also one of the extended fields of bariatric endoscopy. So coming to space occupying devices, I think most of us know about the balloons, and there are multiple balloons in the market like Orbera, then you have the double balloon, swallowable balloon, so on and so forth. Of late, we use most often the adjustable gastric balloon called the SPADS 3. And if you see here, there are multiple balloons with different properties, but more or less, typically what you can differentiate it as air-filled balloons and liquid-filled balloons. But we most often use the liquid-filled balloons, which are currently in the market. FDA has approved an air-filled balloon recently, but it's not in the Indian market. So this is again the list of balloons which are there. And I think probably this video I need not have to show, but for the physicians who are there, I just fast forward the video because it's commonly done elsewhere, where this is how the balloon is put. You put the balloon inside the stomach, inside the mouth, under conscious sedation. It's an OPD based procedure, daycare. The patient walks in, gets the balloon implanted, and within an hour or two, he'll go out, and then we'll make them follow a specific diet, which includes liquid diet for the first week, second and third week, semi-solid or prune diet, and then fourth week, the original diet in a low calorie form. So as you see here, this is how the balloon looks once you inflate, and then it hardly takes 10 to 15 minutes to do the whole procedure. And once that is done, then you pull out the tag and then leave the balloon there. So this is again one interesting thing, which is, as I told you earlier, it's a gas-filled balloon. So you don't have to do anything endoscopically. The patient comes and sits in your office chamber. You make the patient ingest the balloon like a capsule. And once the balloon gets inside, then it will swell. And typically this is a nitrogen gas mixture filled balloon, which you swallow 3 balloons at a time. And then after 6 months, you take out the balloon. And that of course is taken endoscopically. But you do have a balloon now, it's called Ellipse, which you can ingest just like capsule. And after 6 months, it will get disintegrated within the stomach and then passes off the feces. So there's no endoscope in that. So it's also going to be coming soon into the market. So if you see the intragastric balloons, the long-term follow-up, what we can conclude is there is definitely, it's a harmless procedure, very safe, and the weight loss, what happens will be maintained, sustained up to 2.5 years. So that's about the balloons. Then you have this transpyloric shuttle. Of course, this company has taken a backseat because even though it is FDA approved, now it is not in the market because of the bankruptcy of the company. This is again, just to touch upon a small balloon which is there in the pylorus, and we have a twig which will be in the duodenum so that it will cause early satiety, or probably the food, whatever is there in the stomach, it will slowly get into the duodenum by creating an artificial gastroparesis. Now coming to the second topic, that is endoluminal restrictive approaches. This is again, see, you have seen space occupying devices, that is the volume of the stomach is reduced by putting a space occupying device. Now you reduce the volume of stomach not by putting the space occupying device, but by restrictive approaches like you stitch the stomach and then get down the volume by 50 to 60%. This is one thing which we all do. And in fact, Yogesh has got a very good experience and he's one of the pioneers in this field in the country. So if you see the gastric plication instrument, there are a lot many in this, but primarily there are three which are currently approved by CE mark as well as FDA. And one is Apollo Overstitch that is widely used across India and other parts of the world. Then you have primary obesity surgical endoluminal pose, which is again a device which is currently under the approval of FDA, but it is CE marked. And Endomina is again a device from Brussels, where our good friends have designed it from University of Erasmus in Brussels. So coming to Apollo Overstitch, it's called endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty. As you see on the video, it's a very simple OPD-based procedure where you have an inbuilt device with a double channel scope where we go inside the stomach and then start suturing the stomach at the incisura that is in the mid body of stomach. And then we slowly ascend upwards up to the GE junction that is 5 centimeters below the GE junction. We typically end up putting around 5 to 6 sutures. As you see here, I'll just take a little time to explain you and understand how it is done. So the first suture is put on the anterior wall of stomach at the incisura. Then the second suture is put at the greater curvature, and the third on the posterior wall. And then you wind back U-shaped pattern and come back to this area. And then you cinch it or stitch it. So in this way, you do 5 to 6 sutures and then reduce the volume of stomach by 60 to 70% or 50 to 60%. So it hardly takes 45 minutes. And once the procedure is done, we usually keep the patient overnight because it is done under general anesthesia. Or some people, if they are doing good enough, the same day night, we discharge them. And as I told you, like in balloons, we follow the same diet of liquid diet for a couple of weeks and then going to the semi-solid diet. And if you see the literature published on this particular technique, there is a 2-year follow-up data from a Spanish group, which was published in 2017, where they found this sustained weight loss, total body weight loss of 18% at the end of 2 years. And another group from University of Weill Cornell in New York, Reem Sharayas, they came with a 5-year follow-up where they have found the consistency of weight loss up to 5 years around 14.5%. This is something which is amazing. And I can authentically say it is at par with any of the bariatric surgical procedures. Again, coming to adverse events, because it is again invasive, minimally invasive kind of thing. So you all must be having, is there any complication? Very minimal, self-limiting complications like nausea, dyspepsia, perigastric collections. And they're all very, I mean, trust me, we have more than 100 or a series of cases and we never had any single complication. The second one, as I told you before, it is primary surgery obesity endoluminal. This is again the same kind of suturing device, but unlike the earlier one which I showed, we just do this suturing in the form of islands, like you do at one level, then go at another level. But typically, you end up doing stitching of the stomach at the antrum and body. So this is one which we did in one of our workshops, and we are fortunate enough to have good amount of this experience in all the 3 devices which are existing in the world. So I'll just skip this. Then about the pose literature, you see the 12-month data of total body loss is around 13%, which is again very good enough. And the third one is again another suturing device called Endomina. This is developed from the Endo Tools company, which is a patent of Professor Jacques Devier from University of Brussels in Belgium, where again this is a very simple technique, and this again uses the same kind of methodology, but it is having a little different accessories are being used, and you take the same transmural sutures, suture it and then come back. It hardly takes again 1 hour. And in fact, we are going to start a multi-center study with this device next month with 15 centers in Europe and 1 in India, where we are going to see the patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease doing Endomina pre and post with a paid liver biopsy. So this is another tool which I thought I'll just show you, which is there currently in the market. I'll skip the video again, and then I'll go to what's been in Endomina. So if you see the comparison of endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty versus laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy, which is again now the thing which props up in many of our minds. Is it at par, or is it better, or is it inferior? So if you see the efficacy, it is definitely equal to ESG, but again, mind you, it is only for people who have a BMI less than 40. If they are super obese or class 3 obesity, then obviously LSG has got definitely a better role on this. But again, if you compare the morbidity, then because it is a minimally invasive procedure and no major post-op leaks and all, so this is one series which has come up from Johns Hopkins University by our good friend Vivek Kumbari, where he has shown that the morbidity is definitely less if you compare ESG versus sleeve gastrectomy. Again, another device which is in US, it is there, FDA approved, but I don't think it will never take up in India, because this is something weird which you cannot even think of. As you see here, you make something like a percutaneous endoscopic gastrostomy PEG type, where you create a rent between your stomach wall, anterior abdominal wall, and then you put a bag outside. You eat whatever you want, and then once food enter the stomach, you open this and then empty the food. So this is something which sounds very crazy, but yes, it is FDA approved. It's being used in some centers, but we don't know how long it will last. But there's a good amount of data, and trust me, it's approved by FDA. So we cannot really brush it off. Then this is one thing which I closely work on. Of course, it is again a futuristic device in bariatric endoscopy. This is something which is being developed by some folks from University of Michigan, where they have designed a stent, which is like esophageal stent, which is used to cause early satiety. The mechanism in this is, suppose you see the cardia of the stomach, you have a lot of mechanoreceptors, which if you exert pressure, if you take the physiology back, go to physiology back, if you exert pressure on the GE junction at the mechanoreceptors, then that will cause early satiety. So on this basis, we started working with that company, and we did the first in human trial in India, where we found the maximum weight loss of 30% in 6 months, which is again phenomenal. And we are doing the second round of the work on this device because now the COVID is ended, in the next 1 to 2 months, to make the device more robust, and then we'll be going for FDA approval. If you see on how it is being deployed, so it's a very simple inbuilt device with, just like how you see the GERD-X, where you have a small pediatric endoscope which is used to get in. And as you see on the right side of the screen, you just have to put the device, retrovert the scope, and then the gastric disc opens. Then you make the scope straight and then come back. Then your esophageal part of the stent will be deployed. After that, you suture the stent with Apollo overstitch on the proximal end and just leave it. So this is how it looks. And that is about the full sense device, which we are working on personally, and then trying to get a patent out of it. Then, so you see all these, you have seen all the 4 devices. Now you might be thinking, why you have to do all these things where you have a learning curve and all. So to answer our question, there are scientists from Israel who have come up with a EndoZip device, which is a fully automated, more operator dependent endoscopic suturing. Can you imagine? So you just put the device there, then it will automatically drag the mucosa in the stomach, and then it will stitch on its own, which is the pipeline. And trust me, it is not a startup, because the company already started this, and a group from Spain, Gotran Lopez Nava, has done already 10 cases and published the literature also. So that is how the field is evolving, what I wanted to emphasize. So this is how it looks. And probably in the next 1-2 years, it might come down into the market also. So that's all about the obesity, standalone obesity treatment, where you either remodel the stomach with a space occupying device or suturing device. So now one thing which is very interesting for all of us, probably the physicians who are on the, who have logged in, and of course other people also, India. So India, it's a capital, diabetes capital of the world. And now we are slowly becoming the obesity capital also. So is there something where we can address this diabesity, so-called, diabetes and obesity, with a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? Because we gastroenterologists see day in, day out the fatty liver, which the treatment from pharmacology type, pharmacotherapy angle is very minimal. Hardly we have any drugs in that. So this is one thing which we closely work on, and we have a lot of R&D being happening in our institute in this field. So this one thing, what in physician folks here, I want you to understand or kind of take a recap of your knowledge is, brain is no more the epicenter for metabolic control. We personally believe that duodenum is the epicenter of metabolic control. As you see on the screen, there are multiple cells which are there lining in the duodenal wall, which produce a lot of these hormonal changes. And those are the cells, or that's the area which is responsible for your GLP-1 and GIP and pancreatic YY peptide and so on and so forth. So keeping this in mind, the perception of diabetes has changed over a period of time, and there's a lot of work going on in this field in the US and also in Europe, and a lot of endocrinologists are now turning their interest at this level. So if you see the glucose metabolism, what we all know is pancreas is the one which has got the islets and it produces insulin, so on and so forth. But now the theory is changing from that it's not the pancreas alone, but the metabolic control, the brain of the metabolic control is in the first part of duodenum. I'll tell you why. If you see this next animation, a couple of slides, as you see here, if you eat a normal balanced diet, you have these black dots on the left and white dots on the right. So these are the incretins and anti-incretins. The black is anti-incretins and the white is incretins. When you eat a balanced food, which contains good nutrition products and less low fat and all, which we quite often don't do. But if you have a balanced food, which contains all the vegetables, greens and all, these anti-incretins and incretins maintain their balance, and that leads to euglycemia. But not every day you have that, and obviously you cheat on the weekends or many often times even on the weekdays also. When you eat a fatty food, something like a dessert or a chocolate, so what happens then is when you eat a fatty food, there will be imbalance between these incretins and anti-incretins, where the anti-incretins increase in number. That leads to insulin resistance factors increase, which leads to increase in hyperglycemia, hypertriglyceridemia, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. This is what happens. See, as I told you, this is the exact site where all these things happen in the duodenum. That's the reason why duodenum is considered as a main brain for metabolic control. And as you see in this pictorial diagram, when the anti-incretins dominate the incretins, there will be delayed insulin response, hyperinsulinemia, which leads to diabetes. So with this in mind, our bariatric surgical colleagues already started working on this, and then they started doing the Roux-en-Y bypass procedures as well as the ileal interpositions. And it's, as I told you in the initial slide, it's way beyond. It is proved in literature that if you have a RYGB or Roux-en-Y bypass being done, there are fantastic results in terms of weight loss and also diabetes improvement. So, but only thing is, not everybody is fit enough. Not everybody will go for surgery because it's not that easy for a obese, healthy patient to convince for a surgery. So with this in mind, the concept of duodenojejunal bypass liners came into the work. That is, you put a bypass liner in the duodenum, which will cover the first part of duodenum where the mucosa and your food won't get in contact. As I told you the physiology before, when the mucosa and food don't get in contact, the hormones won't get activated and the incretins and anti-incretins balance will be maintained. So with that in mind, scientists started working on creating a sheath which covers the first part of duodenum, and with that maintenance of euglycemia by anti-incretin balance, there will be the partial weight loss and also improvement in the glycemic control. So with this company by name EndoBarrier in USA got FDA approval, and they had fantastic results in that. But unfortunately, what happened is over a period of 1 year follow-up, few of the patients had some severe complications in the form of pyemic liver abscess leading to very dreadful complications and increase in the morbidity. So with that, as we all know about the stringent guidelines of US FDA, the FDA has withdrawn this device from the market. But of course, it has got good results when it was really studied upon. So, and because the FDA has withdrawn, then it has taken a backseat. So now with this concept of duodenojejunal bypass liners, we at AAG, in conjunction with a company in Minneapolis in USA, it's called Metamodics, we started working on this at the bench side on animal models, and then we created something which is alike. The concept is same, but only thing is, if you see on this picture, you have the stent, which is like a bifline stent, which will prevent these so-called liver abscess complications. And we started working on this device, fortunately, with a couple of scientists who are based out of Minneapolis, which is again a hub of medtech devices in the world. And I'll just show you the video how it is being designed. So as you see on the animation, you just have to have a simple upper GI scope. Then you put in this device, which contains a capsule on the proximal end, and then you put the device at the pyloroduodenal area, and you release the bifline stent as you see on the screen. I'll show you in the humans how it looks when we really do the case in real life time. Uh, just a moment. Yeah. So if you see here, this is how it looks. You just have to put in the device in the pyloroduodenal channel and then open the duodenal part of the stent and then the pyloric part of the stent and then leave it there. So it's got a 60 centimeter poly Teflon sheath which covers the duodenum up to 60 centimeters without having any obstruction at the papilla. Then it's hardly takes 20 to 25 minutes for the device to deploy, and it can be done by any average endoscopist. With that in mind, with the Indian scenario of economics, we thought we will do something which is really easy to get into the market and then really affordable. And we could achieve almost 90% of the device manufacturing thing, and there were only 10% of it which is probably because COVID got delayed. And after 6 months, we obviously, it is a foreign body, so we take it out. And sorry, let me go back. So it's a foreign body, so we'll take out that, and it's very easy to take that out. So it's got a lasso which you have to grab it with a guide wire, and then just like any metallic stent, you take the stent inside, and then once you start retrieving the stent, it collapses and then it easily comes into the capsule and you pull it out. It hardly takes 5 minutes. So this is again a live video where I'm showing you how the stent gets collapsed when you catch the lasso and pull it inside, and the whole stent gets into tubular organ, gets into this capsule, and then you just have to take out the capsule very easily. So this is how the retrieval is done. So this is the first in human trials done at our place, and we have in this column, as you see, HbA1c improvement by 1.8 to 2% with weight loss of around 12.6%. But not everything is so rosy as I explained. There were a little bit of this migration issues was happening. So we again went on to the bench side, did some animal studies in Minneapolis, and now we are coming up with a tether which will exactly adhere this particular device there without migration. We have achieved successful animal model trials last couple of months in the US, and now in the next 1-2 months we'll starting the second phase of human trials, and again we'll go to the CE mark and FDA approval. So this is about the duodenojejunal bypass liners. But again, now the one thing which comes in our mind is why unnecessarily put a foreign body inside? These are all foreign bodies, isn't it? So with that in mind, people started working on why don't you do some ablation of the duodenal mucosa where these cells are playing all this mischief. And with that, the concept of duodenal mucosal ablation came in mind, and then people started working on that. Trust me, now that duodenal mucosal resurfacing is a device which is commercially available in market. It has got the European authorities approval and is almost due for FDA approval. And that is one thing which we all look upon, because it is one easily doable OPD based procedure, and you can reproduce that every 6 months to 1 year. So that is what is called as duodenal mucosal resurfacing procedure. It's an animation video. As you see here, you just put a simple upper GI scope and put a guide wire. On the guide wire, there will be a railroading of this device. As you see here, it is something called as heat technology, where hot water at 100 degrees centigrade is sent through this device, which will ablate the mucosa. And trust me, it doesn't cause any perforation, because it's going to ablate only the first, second layers of duodenal wall, not deep. And typically this procedure takes around half an hour, and you start ablating at the at the duodenal D1 first part up to 60 centimeters without touching the papilla of Vater, and then coming back. So if you see the studies related to this DMR technique, so this is the pictorial diagram. As you see here, pre-procedure, you lift the mucosa, duodenal mucosa, ablate the duodenum, and then you, after 3 months, you find complete healing of mucosa. But of course, you'll have fantastic results on this. So there are a couple of studies which have been done: Revita 1, 2, Inspire, and Domino. Revita 2 actually has been published recently in the last month Gut journal. So in all these studies, what they have seen is there is a very good improvement in the HbA1c percentage by 1.5 to 2%. Even for that matter, improvement in the fasting glucose levels also. They also have found in this set of patients improvement in the liver enzymes. And even the early microalbuminuria has also come back to normal. So this is something which we all are looking upon. And probably this will definitely give a paradigm shift in the field of treating diabetes, standalone diabetes. And this might be an answer for many of the Indians, probably the next 6 months to 1 year, hopefully, when it comes to the Indian market. So this is just recapping. So because that is a heat technology, then there is a chance of stenosis of this duodenal mucosa, or long term, we don't know whether it will be having a malignant potential. So on that basis, people started working on a non-heat technology, which is called the electroporation. That is, again, it's a heat, non-heat technology where you do the ablation of cells with a technique called electroporation, which is like the radio frequency ablation. So very close friend and my mentor from Mayo Clinic, Barham Abudai, he started working on this, and in Mayo, they are working on the animal models. This probably will be more robust, but of course, I don't want to talk much on this because it's again in the initial starting phases. So just to sum up or to come into conclusion, one thing what all of us have to remember, even the gastroenterologists or physicians and all, this is a multidisciplinary approach of treating obesity or diabetes patients. It's never a single thing. If you open your shop and then say, I want to treat obesity patients, it won't do well. I'll tell you why. Obesity is a chronic problem, and people who are obese, especially people who have binge eating habits, whatever you do, if you don't have a holistic approach of treating that particular patient, you will never succeed. Because if you see, I'll show you, I think the bariatric surgeon also agree with me. I'll show you n number of people who underwent lap sleeve gastrectomy regain weight. You know why? Because if they don't have control on the eating habits, the post LSG, the stomach will be hardly a size of an apple. But if you start eating over a period of 1.5 to 2 years, stomach is elastic organ. It swells like a balloon. So if you put in more food, the pouch increases in size, and then that leads to weight gain. So what I mean to say is it's a multidisciplinary approach where you need a gastroenterologist, bariatric surgeon, bariatric endoscopist, psychiatrist to counsel them, because people post of these procedures will have a massive weight loss, which they will go into depression. Then you need a nutritionist who is the key person, who he or she is a key person in the whole gamut. Then you need a psychologist, and of course other specialists like cardiologists, endocrinologists, so on and so forth. So this is very important. And once you have this holistic approach only, the results will be good. With this in mind, we at AAG started having a team of dedicated people who work in this center for obesity. And as you see the pyramid here, Diet, physical activity, behavioral modification is the bottom line. Pharmacotherapy, the next. And surgery, of course, is ultimate. But this is the place where the bariatric endoscopy has got a definite role. And trust me, this is going to have undisputed role in the next decade if you see in many of these people who are obese and diabetic or standalone obese, standalone diabetic, because the way the science is evolving in this field, so that is something which we have to all look upon. And we also should create an awareness among the public, and for that matter, even I should not say, but I think even for gastroenterologists per se, it is an evolving field. Not many know in depth about what's happening in this. So to end, who qualifies for weight loss surgical procedures or the bariatric endoscopic procedures? Overweight, that is the first category. You have diet, exercise, and lifestyle modification. Obese, that is class 1 obesity, endoscopy has a good role. Class 2 and class 3, laparoscopy is undisputedly having a good role. But endoscopy, if you ask me, it has got through and through, from the overweight till the class 3 obesity, it has got a place. Of course, morbidly obese, people who are not willing for surgery, or people who have some not fit for surgery rather. So there we can offer these endoscopic procedures. But otherwise, between 27.5 BMI to 40 are the ideal people who will really benefit with this. But again, with the holistic approach of constant counseling, nutritional advice, psychological counseling, and motivation of these patients. And what I feel personally is you should pick up I don't say patient, but the subject who is obese, who is really motivated, then your results are good. Probably the initial days when you start doing your bariatric endoscopy practice, or for the matter, any other, even the surgical thing also, the motivated patient is one which gives you satisfaction that he or she lost weight, and also the patient vis-a-vis. With this, I think I'll end here, and then I'll be happy to take questions. I covered very superficially, but I thought this is one which I just wanted to keep in a nutshell of what's happening in this field, and who are the patients who will ideally benefit with bariatric endoscopy, and whom you should really refer to the bariatric endoscopist or any other person who is doing this. Yogesh, I think I've covered significantly, but of course superficially.
Yes,
And
yes.
just to conclude, this is one slide which I always put up on. It's not that whatever science I talked is only the thing which you should follow. First is patient preference or his or her choice, then doctor's indication. If you balance both these things, then you can go forward and offer him or her a procedure which will really benefit. And again, there are some things which you cannot change, that is the genetic profile and how the people respond and the pharmacodynamics. So these are all the things which have to be balanced, and then you kind of do it in a holistic approach. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your lucid presentation. And I would like to request today's moderator, Dr. Anand Patel, to please moderate the session, share your experience with surgical procedures, and also request Dr. Vishwanath and Dr. Kapil to share their experience and continue this session further. There will be few questions in the chat box also. You may ask to sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rakesh, to enlighten us that there is another way of looking obesity to manage. And as you correctly pointed that obesity surgeries, if you take 100 patients, only one person get the all eligibility criteria. The causes can be different, patient preference or maybe contraindication or patient insurance. So definitely the bariatric endoscopy has a role to get the maximum benefit of weight loss, and it would be a supplementary material. However, I would like to know that among these various endoscopic procedures, how do you choose the one for the patient? What is your selection criteria for the procedure selection rather than the indication of bariatric endoscopy?
Yeah, so very good question, Anand. Coming to the duodenal procedures, again, none of them are still in market commercially. But if you ask me about choosing between a balloon versus sleeve gastroplasty, I believe simply in one baseline. Of course, the BMI is criteria 27.5 to 40. Patient who is motivated and then really doing well, who wants to have a bridge to weight loss. And for them, and of course, BMI between 27.5 to 35. For them, I say balloon is good enough. But patient who has no control on the weight loss, binge eater, from 27.5 to 40, I personally believe ESG is the only answer. So that's how I, clinically categorize.
Yes.
And that's what I feel it makes sense, because once you take out the balloon, then again that fellow will start eating.
Again, the patient gets.
So Kapil, what are your results? I think you also done 10 to 15 procedures of ESG or maybe more. What is your experience?
So, as Dr. Rakesh told that basically it depends upon patient's motivation and how frequently or how much trial you have given before subjecting the patient to procedure. Because if the patient is not motivated to lose weight, so what they do, they start increasing diet after the procedure. So one patient had like this. So she was with her family pressure did ESG, and but ultimately what happened, there was weight regain, and on reviewing found that she started eating food. So that will happen with everyone. So the best thing which Dr. Rakesh told is motivation and your team, and there should be some support group. So maybe your nutritionist as well as the psychiatrist should be involved. Every time when the patient comes, they have to meet, see where the patient has reached. So whether a patient is losing motivation or patient is has some problem and not able to continue, then that time that all your efforts will fail. So a team effort has to be required. A single only endoscopist or surgeon cannot manage such patients. Only thing which bypass is there, which but it's done in the less amount of cases. Mostly is laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy. So that's why done over worldwide. So restrictive procedures are the most common procedures. So motivation is important, because in bypass procedures, even patient eats, he or she will be having malabsorption, so that will take care of weight loss. But for most of the procedure, what we are addressing and trying, like for duodenal metabolic procedures, if the patient keeps on eating, even you ablate them, they will start regaining weight. Even the HbA1c will come down, but there'll be weight regain, and again all the things will go down. So I think that it's a team effort, and patient selection criteria is more important. And for my patients, I've done around 15 to 20 now, and the average weight loss is 15 to 20%, around 6 months to 1 year. During last 1 year, it has come down because of COVID. Otherwise, previously, the follow-up is now more than 1 year. All have done well, more than 15% weight loss. Sometimes some have even lost, who are motivated well, more than 20% weight loss is also they have achieved.
So Vishwanath, I request you, there are a few questions in the chat box. You can address them. You are mute. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. Dr. Rakesh, it was an excellent holistic approach, which we should probably apply to all obese patients. We have some questions from the audience. What is the learning curve for ESG? It's a difficult question.
From Dhruvin. So probably 15 to 20 procedures. And initially, you have to be a little bit rich, because you cannot afford to do something on this. All the devices are very costly. But first 5 to 10 cases, you end up making many mistakes. And mistakes are so costly in this procedure that each mistake will probably cost you around 10 to 15,000. So that's one thing which you have to be prepared to satisfy, to kind of counsel yourself and your management if you're working in a corporate hospital. But if you're having something like Yogesh's setup, then you can punish yourself. So 15, that Yogesh also will agree, 15 to 20 procedures probably is the learning curve, what I feel personally.
Same, Dr. Dhruvin also asked, what are the contraindications for intragastric balloons, and what is the upper limit for BMI for which it is indicated? I think you have addressed it. Maybe you can reiterate it.
Yeah, so up to 35 is one which we look upon for people to have improvement with intragastric balloons. Contraindications is very common. One is severe portal hypertensive gastropathy or fundal varices or large eosinophil varices. But for the matter of the fact, on this note, I want to tell people now with the liver transplant surgeons, of course, it's happening in Delhi and elsewhere also, where they are really pushing the overweight, both donor and recipient for intragastric balloons to have a weight loss. So contraindications are very obvious. The varices and any gastric subepithelial lesions, all these things are contraindications.
Yeah. One question from Dr. Pradeep Jain from Ahmedabad. If the patient is going for laparoscopic obesity surgery, what criteria he should fulfill and up to what age it can be done?
Anand, you can take it.
Yeah, I would like to answer this question. Basic indication is remain same. The person who has more than 35 of BMI with comorbidities, and the person who has more than 40 BMI without comorbidities, as well as for the low BMI patients, what we do for the metabolic surgery. Person BMI more than 27.5 with uncontrolled or poorly controlled diabetes can obtain for any kind of laparoscopic bariatric surgery, provided that in those group of the patients, the residual pancreatic functions are good. Otherwise, low BMI patients with the bariatric surgery may not get the reward of remission of diabetes. And second is about the age. Well, it is well highlighted that more than 16 years of age and upper limit is maybe a 65 or 75 because the chronological age does not matter. If the patients had a lot of comorbidities, even in a very young child, like Prader-Willi syndromes or leptin deficiencies, then even at the very young age, one can proceed with the surgery. And if the person is very elderly, 75 years, but the comorbidity is high, and if you think that patient can sustain the surgery, then the patient is eligible for bariatric surgery.
One last question by Dr. Ravindra, our friend in Ahmedabad. Sir, can you guide how to start a bariatric program at an endoscopy center?
How to start a bariatric program? Okay. So in fact, last year before COVID, we had an opportunity to train around 300 plus endoscopists across the world on a hands-on workshops. So now we are restarting again next month, but it's again a focus group of 5 to 6. So what I feel personally is one, you should have a gross idea of how it is being done. Second, probably you need to have a live case to show them. And third, of course, initially, please don't start on a human, the bariatric endoscopy. You have to have a hands-on on a wet model, the porcine model. And after that, you can switch on your gear to start doing it on human beings.
I would like to say something about regarding the starting the bariatric endoscopic program. Being a surgeon, I can say that our country people has very limited resources, right? So the selection of the patient is very, very important. If the person has come with an expectation and you think that the endoscopy can resolve its most of the complaint, then you should rightly give that choice. Otherwise, you should clear-cutly say to the patient that you would be most probably get benefit with bariatric surgeries rather than the endoscopic therapy. So selection of the patient is very, very important during the early stage of career.
Correct. I agree.
So there are no further questions. So if Dr. Anand, Kapil, Vishwanath allow, can we close the session for today?
Yeah.
Before that, I would request you to be there for 2 minutes as this is the last session of the talk, last session of the summit. So I request our president, Dr. Ashwin Garvi, to name 15 to 16 people who have attended more than 10 sessions, and they will be given a gift by the organizing committee. So Dr. Ashwin, please announce their names and then we can.
I'm ready. I'm just opening the page because I couldn't remember the names of those people. I'm very glad to congratulate you that you have covered almost all the subjects of the gastroenterology. And I am very much thankful to Dr. Goenka ji as your guru. He has become guru of all of us in the subject of gastroenterology by giving these two very important clinical academic activities. and you have covered almost very simple topics to the most advanced topics of metabolic disorder, even malignancy, all these. So my job is now to declare the names of those who have attended more than 10 clinics and who are eligible to get Dr. Rajiv Mehta book on clinical gastroenterology. They are, I'm enumerating their names, Dr. Rafiq Ghachi from Nadiyad, Dr. Naveen K. Parikh from Ahmedabad, Dr. Virut Patel from Rajkot, Dr. Ashok Upadhyay from Hyderabad, Dr. Smith Kumar Vagasia from New Delhi, Dr. Mustafa Rangwala from Ahmedabad, Dr. N.K. Gupta from Kota, Dr. Vimal Sardeva from Rajkot, Dr. Pradeep Nigam from Rewa, Dr. Deepak Viramgami from Ahmedabad, Dr. Jasmine Waghela from Nadiyad, Dr. Maitre Patel from Ahmedabad, Dr. Manish Jain from Sagar, MP, Dr. Chintan Patel from Valsad, Dr. Ashwin Gadhvi, myself from Ahmedabad, Dr. Hemant Golani from Jaipur. They all are congratulated. I congratulate them for attending these many academic sessions. યોગેશ, અહીંયા પણ ગુજરાતીઓએ જ રંગ રાખ્યો છે. મોટાભાગના ગુજરાતી ડોક્ટરોએ તારા આટલા બધા લેક્ચર સરસ રીતે અટેન્ડ કર્યા છે. અને two things I have learned from you, Yogesh, that the way in which you started these activities, and when I was the president of the Association of Physicians of Ahmedabad, I was very much impressed that you kept all the lecture every weekly. That has given a lot of interest to all the participants that what will be in the next lecture at a particular day or particular time, they remain prepared to attend the lectures. Instead of giving all the lectures in 1 or 2 sessions, they have deliberately attended most of the lectures, and it has given a new concept even to other my friends, cardiologists, diabetologists, neurologists. They all have now realized that if they deliver the lectures in this way every weekly, then it will be more useful and beneficial to the physician. Second thing, you have asked even the physicians to give the topics of their interest, and thereby you collected the basic information, what will be useful to the physician. In that way, you plan these academic lectures, and at the end, I would say that they have become very much useful to all of us. I congratulate you and your team. I thank you and Association of Physicians of Ahmedabad, all the associations who are concerned with these academic meets, all the organizations who have supported and helped you, and especially I am thankful to Dr. Mahesh Goenkaji, who have helped you and us in creating such a nice topics. Thank you once again, Yogesh, and I wish you all the best for coming years.
Thank you, Dr. Anand. Thank you, Dr. Vishwanath, and thank you, Dr. Kapil. And at the end, I would like to thank our team, entire team of APN Noble Gastro Hospital, also Solaris division of Sun Pharma, Mr. Santosh and his team for actively participating technically as well as doing the field work. Thank you all. Thank you. See you soon, Kapil, Vishwanath, and Anand. Bye. Take care. Thank you.
Bye, good night.
Thank you.